Welcome to the ABOP podcast. ABOP is the Alliance of Black Orchestral Percussionists, a nonprofit organization that focuses on mentoring future generations of Black percussionists. My name is Raynor Carroll. I am an ABOP founder. Thank you for joining our podcast. This episode focuses on college audition preparation. Joining me for this discussion, Ricky Burkhead, Professor of Music and Director of Percussion Studies, University of Mississippi, and an ABOP advisor. Terry McKinney, Principal Percussion, Baton Rogue Symphony, and an ABOP mentor. Don Parker, Chair and Professor of Music, Georgia College and State University, ABOP advisor, and host to our quarterly Zoom exchanges. And Wesley Sumpter, former LA Phil Percussion Fellow, currently a freelance artist and an ABOP mentor. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Our topic is college audition preparation. You know, this is an essential part of what ABOP's mentorship program does, give direction and guidance to our proteges in preparation for the next level, whether it's high school to college or college to grad school, or the ultimate grad school to a professional job, which, of course, ideally is an orchestra gig. And by the way, we have had recent success stories of 3 of our proteges successfully progressing to the next level of education, high school to college with London Johnson, and college to grad school with Torrance Bunton Jr. and Alexa Clausen. So accolades to ABOP and hard work that our proteges have put in. I believe that's due at this point.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
So to start the discussion, when should or does the preparation begin? And let's say high school to college. When should a student start preparing for that?
Well, I would say, obviously, a student that's interested in going to the next level, once they hit high school in 9th and 10th grade, they're probably pretty sure of themselves. So definitely, that 10th grade year going into junior year is a kind of a crucial year. Not just a standpoint of just preparing for an audition, but also preparing to get into college. There are a lot of key points in terms of dealing with testing that's going to get them to the school they want to get to. So the academics is kind of crucial to make sure that's in place. Because some of the schools, you can't get in unless you have a certain GPA. So
Right.
You need to set yourself up for that. So that's important. My background's a little different, where I went to an all-boy Catholic preparatory college prep school from 6th to 12th grade.
Wow, must have been tough, man.
So, I didn't have any of that. I didn't have any of the music at school. I had it outside of school. And so, I was doing the private lessons and all that stuff. So everyone's a little different. So I may not have had the pressures of those ensembles for all state and everything else going on at the same time. But there was other pressures dealing with high level playing. As some of you may know, I was in the DC Youth Orchestra program during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was Tuesday night, Thursday night, Saturday for, about 8 years.
My goodness.
And so that it's a little different in terms of that prep. So a student nowadays, definitely the academics is critical. I mean, there's so much competition, and especially for those students of color, they're going to be, if you have the grades, you're going to have choices. If you don't have the grades, then you're going to have limitations.
Yeah.
And so no need to put limits on that.
Oh, Don, can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
Is there a GPA that we're looking for, or does it depend on the school?
3.0 and above.
All right.
Because it's scholarships you have to be considered about too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because they're going to look at, from a financial aid standpoint, they're going to look at probably your junior year and your senior year. Your junior year, because that's when you start all the testing, and that's when they're going to look to see where you are in terms of taking that, and then you're going to the different schools. You should be looking at that strongly. That's one thing you don't want to have to worry about from a playing standpoint. If you're a good player, that's great. If you're on board with there, and we can talk about that more. But the other things that can derail something, those are the things you can control.
Do schools in Georgia consider ACT scores?
Yes, they do. They can go either ACT or SAT. I think they can toggle back and forth depending on what's needed.
Okay.
So for a prospective student, Is it not right that they have to apply, or the application goes to two different places, perhaps? One, the School of Music, and one, the university. So obviously, the university is looking more at the academic record, and the School of Music is looking, I would think, maybe towards their audition.
Yeah, it's like that here in Mississippi, especially at the University of Mississippi. For band scholarships, though, they tend to award more to students with higher ACT scores. The university would give you a full ride when you get up to 30. And then the band would give you more scholarship money when you have scores like that. And if you have a really good audition, they're going to give you everything that they can, and the
Yeah.
department too.
Yeah, I would say there are two separate applications, one for the school, and then there's actually the application for when you audition. And so that's how we break it up, at least here in Georgia, at least what I've seen. That application, oftentimes that's the thing you're dealing with admissions, understanding that, okay, just because they got into the school doesn't mean they're getting into the music department.
Right.
So you got to balance that out. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's a tough conversation. We have, Georgia College is it's not a performance-based school, but we have students that have pretty high GPAs coming in the door. I mean, it's the
Mhm.
only, and so that's not even an issue. It's more of an issue of, can they play? What have been their playing experiences? And I'm not sure, Ricky, what you run into, or what was Wesley, or what Terry you run into, but we run into students at a variety of different places in their performance preparation, where some have had no private lessons coming in, or they've just had a band experience, or they like band because it was good, but they have these high GPAs, but they really haven't done that preparation that you would consider appropriate coming
Mhm.
in, or they
Mhm.
haven't been exposed to some things, or they've had a band director or orchestra director or somebody, or or they haven't had a percussionist really teach them, so
Mhm.
they're up against a few little things. And in middle Georgia, that's what we see. Anything above us in the Atlanta area, those students are getting exposed to a lot of different things. Whereas those that are further south, it may be a band experience or a very limited or small experience. Not to say that can't be good, because
Mhm.
they it may show that they have the ability to be able to function in a variety of different settings and adapt.
Mhm.
But at some point in time, they have to say, everyone plays the timpani, this piece, they play it this way.
Mhm.
Everyone plays this solo this way, you know.
So, Terry, looking at his or her experience, as in, what ensembles they've played with, is it fine if it's all just at their high school, or do you want to see some community activity in their application also?
I encourage my students to do things outside of school as much as possible because, at least in Texas, marching band is huge. And
That's it.
that's it. And besides that, maybe they'll do, their wind ensemble, some percussion ensemble things. But if they can do participate with the orchestra, if they can do as much performance as they can, and if they can play, I have some students that want to be a part of the Houston Youth Symphony or the Houston Chamber Orchestra or anything like that. There's a local community orchestra as well. So I tell my kids, hey, go play as much as possible because just being in the band program is extremely limited as far as the repertoire, how much percussion they get to play, their exposure to different styles of music. So in Texas, being in band is a big thing, but I think for any student that wants to go into musical studies, to do more outside of the band program is, I think, essential.
Wesley, your thoughts?
I was one of those students that had, like, my GPA wasn't low, but it wasn't high. And
Hmm.
so going to the University of Georgia, I actually didn't get admitted to the school. So I auditioned for Tim and I got into the music school, but my GPA was a 3.3. And all you need to get the Hope Scholarship was a 3.0 or a little bit higher. And this was at the point where instead of it being full tuition, they were only doing 90%. And then you had to pay for housing and whatnot. But even with a 3.3 GPA, I did not get admitted into the University of Georgia because that
Mm.
year, the people that came in with my class were all like the valedictorian, star student, salutatorians of their high schools in the
Right.
state of Georgia. Some
Hmm.
of them had the Zell Miller Scholarship. Some of them went to international baccalaureate schools, which are on a different curriculum than Title IX schools in the Atlanta public schools that I went to. You know what I mean? So their grades and the way things that they were doing at their schools were weighed a lot differently. So Tim had to do like a special admin. He had to write a letter on my behalf. I had to write a letter and turned into a whole thing. And it was the same thing. I auditioned at Florida State that same year for undergraduate studies with Dr. John Parks,
Yeah, John.
and who's incredible. He's phenomenal.
Yeah,
And
smoking program.
yeah, man, all of his
All
students
of
get
them.
like teaching
Everyone
jobs.
plays like it's lights out.
Yeah, drum set, percussion, doesn't matter
mean,
what it is.
yeah.
And he was going to give me like a full music scholarship, but even then, Florida State was one of those schools as well. My GPA was not the highest compared to the influx of applicants. So I would say if a student is looking to continue to perform or go into musical studies, you need to have options that are on different scales. You need to have your Cleveland Institute of Music or Juilliard, but you also need to have your University of Georgia, and then you also need to have your Georgia Southern. You got to have your options. I'd say no more than 3 to 5 because applications get expensive. You know, applications are upwards of $100 a piece. And so if you're doing 5 schools and you have to do a school application and a school of music application, that's $150, $200 per school. That's $1,000 just for applications. So these are the conversations that fall, unfortunately, these conversations fall on the music teachers, but it's hard for them as well because they're trying to just sustain a program, and with lack of funding from the state, lack of funding from the system, and lack of funding and support from the school and the community in and of itself. And so there's so many ways that students fall by the wayside in this regard and end up not being able to go on to the next level. Now, another option that we don't talk about that I think is good is if students end up going in academically to a university and then minoring in percussion and taking lessons with a graduate TA and then eventually auditioning into the program. Because again, the University of Georgia was one of those schools where it was hard for a lot of students to just get into the school. So a lot of them went to Georgia Southern, Georgia State, University of West Georgia, Albany, Valdosta, and they would get their credits up for the first 2 years, and then they transfer in. Most of my friends were transfer students in their third, fourth, fifth year, or they transferred after their second year, and then they spent another 2 or 3 years at the University of Georgia. I think that is also a viable option for students, because I feel like we also have to make sure that students don't feel that much pressure about not getting into the music school of their choice or not being able to continue, because you can still continue music even if it's not your ideal situation. There's so much that can happen. There's so many resources everywhere that you go. You just have to look for them and find them. And sometimes they're looking you right in the face. But I think if we also encourage that part of things, it's just like when we tell students now, it's like, you don't have to go to college if you don't want to, but if you do, maybe a 4-year degree is not your thing, maybe an associate's degree or a certificate for a trade or something like that. And then you can transfer on into, I think it's okay for us to do that. So, but I think that should start, as Dr. Parker said, around sophomore, junior year, that because of all the things that he listed. Because the kids are getting so bombarded by counselors and teachers with FAFSA, with job fairs, school fairs, and then with the band programs, if your band director is connected with people, they're bringing down. My band director in high school was William Irvin. So he was at Mississippi Valley State. He was Clark Atlanta. He was he's very well known in the HBCU community and the band community.
Yeah, I know it.
Being a top-notch educator. So he would have, Dr. Shelby Chipman from FAMU. He'd have director from Bethune-Cookman Southern, like all these people coming in. And so you have, as a student, you have to manage all of those things. Yeah. If you don't have anyone helping you out with that or telling you where to go, you just kind of just tossing everything out, and you're kind of exhausted by the end of it and don't really know if you've actually done anything, But that was my experience, and it worked. It just happened to work out. Blessed and fortunate that it worked out.
Well,
but,
I'm sure there's a lot behind that. So, but let me take the position of a parent, and Wesley, you mentioned the cost of the application. So how can we help? What resources are out there to help with the cost of the application to school? Because my point of view is that you should have several options out there, meaning that maybe 2 or 3 is not enough, but perhaps 5. And like Wesley was saying, a high tier, middle tier, etc. So what resources are out there for parents that actively want help and assistance in paying for the applications?
Wow. That's one of those ones where you have to start thinking about, budgeting of what you're going to do. Again, that's tied again into, the schools that you're considering. Parents might look in and say, okay, what things are available from the school if we apply at this time? Like an early application could warrant a reduction or a free application. I know we do that here at certain points in time. Those that have early scores in regards to their ACT or their or SAT scores, those that have those early, the earlier you do things may allow the program or allow that particular school to offer some free items. If you apply by this time, your application is free. So those are some things to consider. The other thing to consider, though, is also, are there some, maybe private scholarships or private things from churches and things that might exist that would help defray some of those initial expenses? When we talk about expenses for college, we talk about those just to get in. So maybe there's a church, maybe there's a scholarship program or something that might be available based upon a professional organization that might be available that would allow them to be able to, hey, help supplement some of these things. So those things are the things to look at that might reduce the cost. A university is only going to reduce the cost if you, the student, are valuable to them. That's where you being that top student, again, back to those grades, you being that top student, you being that not just academically, but playing wise, the idea of being involved in those other organizations that you play in that might say, oh, he's a good man, you might consider this. It might just be a recommendation, that might get you to that next level of networking towards additional funds. And so those are the things to type of explore. There might be a legacy thing where maybe, I know that happens at HBCUs sometimes. My child went there, such and such went there. There might be those opportunities through some other foundations and things available. So that could help out a parent. But the biggest thing is being knowledgeable and starting early. I mean, that's really the key.
Yeah.
So here at the University of Mississippi, you can get scholarship money from the department, from band, and of course academic scholarships based on your GPA and ACT. But we don't have any perks that I know of concerning the application fee, and that's the main thing. And as a matter of fact, we can't even make an offer to you until you've been accepted, so you have to apply. Now, I'm going to speak as a grandparent because my grandson is one of my majors in that. Now, he only chose to go to the University of Mississippi. And I have 5 local students who chose Ole Miss first. Well, I had one who went to Berkeley who transferred back to Ole Miss. And talking to them, they thought about other places, but Ole Miss was number one. I'm not sure if they applied in those places. And as for my grandson, at the time, he wasn't working, just going to high school and very involved in band. And they do band all year round, marching band, then they do indoor, and then they do percussion ensemble. So we paid his application fee. I guess students who are from this area, if they want to have like several schools on the list, I'm thinking that pretty much their parents are footing the bill for those application fees. Some of our kids are pretty well off.
Yeah, that's the case here in Georgia College. I mean, it's most of the students are walking around better cars than we are.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'll be honest with you.
and
And
you've been,
Wesley, it, go to UGA, big dogs. They
oh
got,
yeah,
oh my God.
There's something wrong with that
Yeah,
picture,
it's something wrong.
man.
There's
Come
something very
on.
wrong about that. But,
yeah.
it's what
And
you do.
our university is like UGA. Like these kids are really well off. We have from Mississippi, we have the most students enrolled. The next states would be Texas, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Hey, I got 2 degrees from Texas, man. I know. UT.
So again, I'm a parent. I've got a student that's a sophomore going into their junior year. Where do I start? How do I start to pick a school? What are some of the criteria that I should be thinking and considering about? And of course, we know cost is going to be one of them. So
Right.
maybe that eliminates out of state or whatever. But where do you guys start with that?
Wow. If I have a student, I mean, of course, cost, definitely their area of study. If they want to audition orchestra, they just want to do orchestra, that could take them the route of a conservatory. If they want to have exposure to world percussion, well, that's another location as well. One thing I stress to my students is the personality of the teacher. I mean, I've had a student that was very shy, very quiet. And I said, for example, Tom Freer, I guess, I don't know. you probably wouldn't work well with him. I mean, the personality probably wouldn't go well. So, that's definitely something to consider. A lot of kids don't think about that. They just hear these big school names, these big names of some artists, but they never really think about, well, if I'm going to spend 4 years, however many years at this institution, who will I be working with? How will I vibe with them? And also the climate, some students can't deal with the cold weather or the hot weather or the rainy weather. So,
or any weather.
Or, some students are attracted to a particular school because of their athletic program. And, we're
That's
talking
true.
musicians. So,
Yeah.
some of these big names that you see on TV all the time, I want to go to that school. Well, why? Well, they won the national championship. Okay, what does that mean to you as a percussion
Right.
major?
You ain't playing on the football team.
Right.
Not about to be a walk-on.
That's a good one.
So, Tara, you bring up something very important in my heart is that, getting to know the professor or the teacher you're going to work with. To me, that's critical. That's the reason to me to go to a school. So, but how do you get to know that person? How do you get to spend some time? I always say, in this day and age, you can do a Zoom lesson. That's the cheapest way to do it,
I just remember that just made me think of this. First I'll say the internet is a vast place. I was one of those kids where I was always just on the computer, just looking stuff up. Every day I would come home from band practice and I'd be like, okay, cool. What schools are in Tennessee that I can look at? What schools are in South Carolina? Because I got family in South Carolina. Oh, what's in, I'm just constantly looking and looking and looking. And I remember I went to Florida State's summer music camp for high school students in the 9th grade. That was 9th grade. And then I went to FAMU's marching band camp the next summer. Two completely different things.
Drastically different things.
Two drastically different things. But hey, look, that's why I'm the way I am now. I love it all. It's just, I'll still go on the 50-yard line if I need to. But I remember I saw John Parks play a masterclass for all of the high school students. And I immediately said, okay, cool. This is a guy that I would want to study percussion with. And I said, okay, how can I get in contact with him? I asked one of his students and they were like, oh, just send him an email. So then I emailed him. I said, hey, what do I need to do to come study with you? He was like, do you have a teacher? I was like, no. And then he just kind of gave me all of this advice and just said, you live in Atlanta. These are some of my students who live in Atlanta who you can look at. That it didn't turn into anything, but that was a way to get those resources. Is just, if you see a school or you're trying to figure that out, it's like, okay, cool. Maybe I won't be able to go to Juilliard and study with Dan Druckmann and all these people. Okay, cool. But I can email them and say, hey, well, what are some schools that I should look at if this is my experience level? If they respond, that's great. If they don't, it's whatever. Go find someone else to talk to. Or, there's just so many options out here. So I think if you just look, that's the best way I can tell you. You can literally look up websites that will give you best music schools based on region or best music schools based on budget. And then you can look up, this is why you look up biographies of orchestral players or whatever. You see, where did they study? Oh, this person studied at the University of Georgia. Okay, so who teaches? Oh, this person teaches at the University of Georgia. Great. So I just think as a student, you have to learn to this is the start of being an inquisitive student, an independently inquisitive student, instead of being pushed into it, right? But if you're 13, 14, 15, you may not have that kind of mindset. So I really think that if you go bare bones and you say, okay, percussion in the state of Georgia. Oh, you can study percussion in these places. I didn't even know that was a degree. Percussion performance, percussion education, composition. Again, I just think it's on the students to kind of spearhead that because the parents aren't going to know. My parents didn't know. So I had to kind of take it upon myself to reach out and look for those things. Since the technology is here and we have the access, that's what I would say. I don't know if that answers the question, but
of course,
that's what I did. And as my dad would say, everybody not like you. I get that. So I always try to figure out different ways to get students to get in that mindset of, what to do next or how to order their own steps,
Yeah. So how about other considerations besides the teacher? I'll give you a few, the quality of the instruments at the school. And how many, if the studio size is, let's say 20, 25 percussion majors, how many 5-octave marimbas do you have? What are the practice facilities like?
Access.
Access. Because
we
that's
know,
gonna, You got 25 majors and there's three marimbas, one's a four and a third. That's
Hmm.
going to be tough.
Right. Yeah, and it really is challenging when you go to either, let's just say a PWI or HBCU. There's drastic difference in terms of what the equipment thing is,
Yeah.
depending on that teacher. And having experienced both sides of that, I understand access is crucial because the students don't have access to equipment. How are they going to improve? And so that's another cell that you can look at. You
Yeah.
know, someone's looking in school. Okay, the teacher's one thing. Okay, what kind of equipment access do you have? Are you
Hmm.
going to be able to be in that building, 24/7 or a certain amount of time? Are you
Hmm.
going to have, what ensembles are you going to be in that allow you to be able to develop? That's the other side of the access. You want to get exposed, have exposure to as many opportunities to play as possible. As percussionists, we never know what we're going to be doing. I mean, it was interesting. I think from my days when I was at DePaul in Greencastle, Indiana, there was like two spaces to practice in, and I was in them all the time. And sometimes I'd have to fight for different spaces, when are you getting out? Or better yet, I would find another little hole to go to. Then I realized one of the things over the period of time, each time I've gone to each school I've been at, I've had to create the practice space for those students. I thought that was essential from Arkansas, Pine Bluff to Chadron State College to Missouri and then Fayetteville State. My God, I had to really, it was like an overhaul where we eventually had a performance facility that had a percussion cage. That's how I mean, that was pretty intense for HBCU. We had a percussion cage full of everything. Five octave marimbas, vibraphone, xylophone, chimes, timpani, complete cabinet of stuff. Ricky, you were there. You might remember that. I had that cage in the back of Seabrook Auditorium, man. They
Seabrook, yeah.
and to this day, they've got some equipment now. I can't tell you what the condition of it is now. Can't tell you that, but it's there. And then in another building, and that's another thing, where you got
Hmm.
to go to give access to stuff. In another building, there were 3 practice rooms dedicated for percussion: drum set, timpani, and mallet. And you can stick a snare drum in one of those rooms with it. And they weren't soundproof. You knew that. But the fact is, establishing that culture of access, of letting them know, hey, I'm telling you to do this. Now, here's where you're going to do it at. That's important. So that's another selling point a student needs to look at. They need the teacher access ensembles. What ensembles are available for you to play in? Hopefully there will be percussion ensemble, but ensembles that have other instruments that you have to play with. You are not going to be a drum set soloist coming out of college unless you're just incredibly spoken, or it's just not going. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's going to happen for everybody.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It could, but I would say you need to be able to know that you're going to be playing some ensembles that you are going to grow and develop as a musician. That's important.
Yeah, I was going to say, and use today's technology. I used to say, go, if you're in town, go to these schools and go to the concerts. But now you don't even have to do that. You can see their concerts online. So see the level of playing. Do you see yourself fitting in there or not, or else, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Raynor, I'd also like to throw out there, like Dr. Parker was saying, as far as access, is also the music scene around the school. If you're
Yeah.
orchestral studies, are there orchestras? If you're in the East Coast, you have access to a lot of great orchestras. If you're in the South, it's very hard to get from, major orchestra from one to another. Or if you want to gig, are there playing opportunities? Do musicals come through that you could possibly sub? You got a sub list with a major orchestra or a community orchestra. So I think definitely if you're a performance major, you want to see if there's opportunities outside the school to gig or freelance or even sub in an orchestra.
Yeah, and I would say that's a touchy subject. In my experience at the universities, I have found that some of the band, orchestra, whatever conductors really give the students a hard time when they come up to them and say, I got this gig, I'm going to miss this rehearsal. And they're like, well, aren't you enrolled in school?
Yep.
Isn't school first? I'm like, in my opinion, it's like I would encourage getting gigs because that's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is not for them to continue their student studies, you know?
Yeah.
So you got to be careful about that, what the
Yeah.
expectations are. But I feel I completely agree with you, Terry. It's great to know that you're going to a community that has opportunity, not just at the school. you know, because there is life away from school.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's Raynor, that's a touchy one because I mean,
Now
because
we're hearing from the head of the Department of Music. So
touchy one. I mean,
he will throw the hammer down on
no, I'm
some
not going to throw the hammer
student.
down. I mean, it's one of those things where if you know what your schedule is for that semester, and you know when you have performances, and you know what the syllabus is, which is your contract, and you know that, all right, you plan out. I got that Christmas gig, and it's going to interfere with something, or it's possibly I'll miss something. You need to have that conversation before, not
Yeah.
Right.
you can't be doing that last minute.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean that's where it's like,
Yeah.
you know. And then the other thing is like, you are on scholarship, aren't you?
Oh, okay.
And that
I
will
own
go.
you.
No, 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 no. I'm paying for you.
That's a 1 year scholarship, right? Meaning when we come to review it for next year, okay, you missed that concert. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so it's that conversation could go, well, you did take care of your responsibilities. You had someone cover, you all right, versus I don't know. In the back of their mind, they said, you didn't let me know in enough time. You didn't tell me anything. You borrowing equipment too? What's going on with you? Everyone's eyes went up there. Like, ooh, you mean you borrowing equipment? You making money off my, oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but you're right. Those opportunities to play outside, they are important because that's your network for the future. The other thing,
Yes.
are you going to be able to establish something that you like to do? Maybe you're the writer for a school. Maybe you got that outside, you doing that little side percussion consultant gig at this small school where they need some help with their front line, or they need some help sectionals with certain things, and you're doing that on the side. So, again, Texas is famous for that, but you got plenty of that. But even in the smaller areas, like in Georgia, there's some schools that don't have percussionists, and they need someone to come in and do the band camp, or they need someone to come in and work with their students as they prepare for LPG. It's a lot of things that are happening. So again, those are opportunities if you're going that route. The other thing is whether or not you just want to be that person to kind of, you want to delve into the orchestral thing in a little bit and try to find some of those church orchestral things that might happen. Those are good ways to kind of get into the smaller ensembles that may not be, how you say, centered around the traditional thing of getting into orchestras, as we know it, but they may be the things that allow you to get with some of those other players. Because it's the violinists and the woodwind players that, they are real special, but they may be the people that say, "Oh yeah, such and such plays," because those are the colleagues. Those are your other colleagues in the department that you're coming up with. So you're looking at a total program and seeing, okay, where can I develop as a player and as a musician in terms of what school? So
I think also picking a school that's going to make you well-rounded in your musicianship. And what I mean by that is there are a lot less playing opportunities in orchestra if you're only just doing classical concert percussion. You need to find a place that's also going to have you learn hand drums, other different, I hate to use the word ethnic, other different ethnic instruments, or a drum set, right? Because that helps to expand your network afterwards as well. If you're the guy, like that's what I did. It was drum set, djembe congas, and like all the concert stuff. And now I do all of that stuff freelancing now. But if you end up being the one trick pony, it can kind of work against you in that. So if you're looking at a school and you say, okay, every school is not going to be like Indiana University where you have a professor for every single thing. But if you want to apply there, great. Make sure you know what you're getting into. But if it's a smaller school, does this professor have their hand in other things? It may be something as small as the concert percussionists who can do improvisation on vibes or something like that, or they can play something else, or they have somebody in town that does other things that you could potentially like look at getting lessons with or whatnot. Because it all affects how you approach the instrument and how you approach the music and how you hear it. From score studying to listening or whatever, you can kind of take all of these elements and mold yourself into the type of musician that you think you want to be, and then eventually what you are going to be. So I think that's very important to talk about with younger students as well.
Good point.
Yeah.
So let's say I've selected my 4 or 5 schools. One thing I would recommend the student do is to go to their website and look at the previous auditions that they had listed, the repertoire. Because what I have found is that year to year, the list doesn't change very much. So you get a jump on it by starting to work on it now, what each school has. And even from school to school, it's not that different usually, especially at the freshman level. So that's one of the recommendations that I give is that soon as you've got your list of what schools, you check out the website from the last auditions they had and you start working on it, whether it says a box solo or whatever, if they want you to play drum set and you don't play drum set, start now.
Yeah, totally agree.
I do too.
There's not too much that you probably haven't heard at an audition. But the main thing is you want to show your strengths. But your strength really is not just the strength of instrument, but your strength of preparation, how well you're prepared. I can tell you this, I can hear an audition in about 3 minutes and tell you, 3 or 4 minutes after hearing them play something on each instrument, I can almost tell you what they're about, how serious they are.
I got you beat on that. Give me a minute, man.
Give me a minute. Well, see, I got to hit them in every area. So I got to hear them. I got to hear them play a little bit.
That's true. Because a lot of times you'll have at auditions a really strong snare drum, really strong timpani, mallet's not so good, or, the opposite, really, really great mallet player, but the accessories suck,
Yeah.
So yeah. But I'm just messing with you, Don,
Oh, yeah.
I'll listen to their whole audition, but sometimes I've like, okay, the first minute, okay, this is top notch. They've got it down to the detail. Or they took that repeat and we said no repeat or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I can forgive them on little things if you can see that the musicality is there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's the thing. We assume that everyone will have technique. We assume.
Well.
I said that because that's where you realize as soon as you hear that first snare drum roll, or as soon as you hear the pitch on the timpani not right, or you hear, oh, wait a minute, they blurred that phrase when they were playing that Bach piece or something, or you heard time change in their playing. Those are things. And those are not that's technical stuff. That's sound things. That's musicality stuff. Nothing about saying that they can't do it. It's just the fact that it showed its face right then and there.
Yeah.
The other thing is, when we think about auditions, some students will submit a video audition or a YouTube audition or something, that's when live versus, Memorex or whatever you want to call it, same difference, right? Just better quality.
I don't think Memorex is still in business these days.
Yeah. Ooh, I just showed my age.
There you go.
But see, y'all knew what I was talking about.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
I got a bunch of cassettes, baby. But the bottom line is, those auditions, okay, that means if they're doing something video wise, because maybe they can't make it there,
right?
That's another thing to think about,
Or they can't afford the travel,
Yeah, but then again, they're preparing that, how prepared they are, and then you could prepare the heck out of it, and in this day and age of cut and paste and all the things you can do, we even have a requirement if they do that. This is for anybody auditioning. They have to do it all in one take.
Yeah.
We got to hear it all in one take.
Yeah. So is that the complete list for percussion? Has to be one take or each excerpt?
Each excerpt, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I've
seen at auditions where the whole list needs to be, whether it's 5 or 6 pieces, but it needs to be one take. And that, to me, that's getting a little impractical for percussion because at least for me, I want to move the microphone to the next instrument. I can't have 3 sets of microphone recording as I move, but
Well, the other side of that is with a video versus in person. In person, I actually, we want to hear them how you want to see them in their real environment. We want to see what happens when they have to be in front of somebody to play. It's different. Right. You can record it and just push it out there.
Yeah.
it's a different thing. You know, they may get nervous when someone in front of them. Well, if you get nervous with someone in front of you, do you really want to play? I mean, yes, those are questions you ask yourself. You know, like,
Yeah.
yes, you have some anxiety about that. I mean, performing, you don't, you know, you're like, hey, I love it, you know, or no, I don't like performing, but you know, what is that? You can't be back and forth on that, you know.
Yeah, it's like a basketball player by themselves on the court. They never miss a free throw. Then you put them in a game with 15,000 fans and
Mhm.
6 out of 10, maybe, you
Rick.
know.
Rick.
Pressure.
So, you know, it goes without saying that, you know, you want to have a teacher. You want to have in high school, whatever level you're at, guidance is great. You know, you have your studies, you're spending your time with your instrument, but it helps to have that guidance. So obviously, you're preparing your audition for whether it's freshman at college or grad school. Get a teacher if you don't have one. Get a
Right.
teacher, and hopefully a teacher that's focused on what you're doing to get that added guidance and direction because it's really hard to do it on your own. There's a lot of things that that teacher has, and number one is experience that you don't have.
Strongly agree.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't have one. Tim was my first teacher when I got to college.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Um,
I'm sorry, Wes, I'm gonna bump in there just a second. Same thing for me. Mitchell
yeah.
Peters was my first teacher when I got to college.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So go ahead,
And
Wesley. Sorry.
no, no, it's just if having a teacher is not the option, you have to, again, this is what I was talking about, just learning to be independently inquisitive. Is if you really want the information, it is out there. Like, again, like I'm gonna tell this story again, Mr. Parker. You don't remember this, but there was the HBCU consortium at Gene Childs Young Middle School in Atlanta.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay, so I didn't know what formalin grip I was using because I remember he asked me.
I was a dog on that one.
Oh yeah, we
I know.
we're in the band room and he's like, "Oh, you play formalis?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "What grip you use?" I was like, and he's like, "That's too bad." That moment
See?
is seared into my brain.
See,
And
Don,
but
Don,
the crazy part is,
you didn't need 2 minutes. See, he hadn't even played a note, and you already ejected him.
but I just remember the more impressive part is that like 20 minutes later, me and my band director William Irvin, we get in the car and we're going to like the next event for it, and I'm just quiet as a mouse in the back. And he's talking to somebody who else is in the car. He's like, "Wesley, what you doing back there?" He was like, "Yeah, he probably looking up that formalin grip." I was like, "Yeah, you're damn right. I'm looking up my formalin grip." And this was like when smartphones like first
Yeah.
became a thing. They weren't huge, but like it was the next thing after like a BlackBerry or whatever. So you can actually get on the internet if you had the plan or pay for your minutes, like I did. And I'm looking up these PDFs from people that did dissertations on percussion pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
And I found one where this dude broke it down. It was like, okay, you have cross grip or burn grip, you have traditional grip, you have Mustard Stevens grip. And I was like, oh, I play traditional grip. Great. Now I know. But that was one of those moments again where I continued to go on YouTube. I found a YouTube page where this dude, it was called Marimbology. And the page is still there. I don't think he's putting any videos up in about 10 years. But I found that and I was like, and then this dude just gave exercises. I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing that. Great. Then I had a friend who was in the talent development program with the Atlanta Symphony and studied with Charles Settle, who's now principal percussion in Toronto Symphony. And I would just like ask him, I'd be like, hey, Jordan, what kind of stuff is Charles having you do? He's like, oh, he's having me like do like some exercises out of the George Hamilton Green book. He's having me play some Wilcox. And I'm like, okay, cool. So then I would go cut some grass with my dad. And then I would go buy those books, and then I would start doing. So it's one of those things where you have to like, if you really want it, like you're gonna find it,
Right.
like it's gonna be there. So that was my supplement for not having a teacher, and bugging my parents to take me to like concerts or something like that, or always just staying in the band room and listening to conversations that my teachers were having with other band directors or other students across the public school system, or just being aware of what's happening when you go to the University of Georgia's high school and middle school band festival. You audition to get in, and it's you and a bunch of kids from the state of Georgia, and these are kids from like Alpharetta, Milton High School, all these like affluent areas. They're coming in with like 5 and 6 pairs of xylophone mallets, like 3 and 4 pairs of marimba mallets. And instead of me like being crunchy in the corner, being mad because I can't afford that, I'm like, what you using? Oh, those xylophones. Oh, the Jim Ross series, innovative percussion. Cool. I'm gonna go get me a pair of those. What you using? Oh, the Coopermans are cool. Got you. So that's just how my brain worked. And so that was just one thing after another. So then people started posting videos from symphonies and all this other stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, I need to have a Delacruz etude for college. I don't know what they sound like. People kept putting videos up. I said, okay, I'm going to listen to all 12 etudes. Whichever one I like the best, that's the one I'm going to pick for my college auditions. Right? And so you had that level of fearlessness has to kind of just be like, I'm going to find this information and I'm just going to do what I can. Yeah. And whatever I have, I'm going to max out whatever resource it is. So maxing out the resources, because then once you do that, you will do it for the rest of your life, or you hopefully will do it for the rest of your life. You'll find ways to find information that you may not think you have access to, but you do in different ways. So if you can't afford a teacher, there are ways to do it. You just have to do it like Tim used to always make this joke. He's like, you gotta act like you're a student from like the 1940s with no internet, and you had to go like to the library and check out a book and do all this other. You have to act like you have none of this technology. How would you look for this information? And that really tweaked my brain too, because I'm like, okay, well, I'm writing postcards, they're doing all sorts of stuff. But I think it's important for students to just really understand that just because someone is not telling you the information doesn't mean the information isn't there, right? And even if you may not be able to find as much of the information you would if you had a teacher, something is better than nothing, right? So you always start from that approach. Is that you have a little bit of something and you audition for a school, they're going to see that you did what you could with whatever you had. And that's honestly more impressive sometimes, know. But yes, I would say get a teacher. And all in a nutshell, please do your best to get a teacher. But if you can't, there are ways around that. There are ways to do it.
Right. Totally agree.
I think we would all agree that most of the students are not like Wesley, No. They don't have that creative self and that drive, which, that's fantastic, but it's difficult. It's difficult if you're in a different space where you're not surrounded by a lot of opportunity, like let's say Southern California, you can get inspiration from so many different things, but like if you're somewhere else, I won't name any area, but where there isn't anything in your area or very little, you got to have that creative self. See, what can I do? You have to have that drive that you have, Wesley. And that's a different thing. That's a different thing. Where does that come from? Does it come from your parents? Does it just come from you? You just have it or what? But anyway, so next subject is now that the student, again, they have a few schools in mind and we've talked about what's available at the school. Can we be a little bit more specific with how they should practice at this point? Should they have a practice schedule? What are some of the things they should be doing in preparing? Let's say, again, they're a junior and they're going to have an audition next year. What are some of the things they could do day to day, week to week?
First thing is, establish what you're going to be practicing. That's the first thing. When we talk about, certain areas, they're going to have access to certain things based upon their whatever playing situations they're in currently. So they're going to have to make sure they create that environment for themselves. It's going to be after school or in between classes, or maybe there's a study hall or something that they will be able to work on, but establish a routine for what they need to practice where, because it's where the equipment is where they're going to have to practice. So in terms of routine, they need to think about, you can practice to the test. Here's the piece I'm going to be playing. I'm going to do this Delacruz piece. What drum am I going to play it on? What technical things do I need to work on in order to get there? So in other words, it's making a plan, working from, okay, here's audition day, here's what, and working backwards. Where do you want to be at this point in time? Okay, junior year, I should have played everything that I need to play. And if there's technical things, I've worked that out. During that senior year, you should be playing that stuff, just playing it playing it on a regular basis. So all the fundamental things that you need to know should be in place. The musical things are the things you should be working on, so that when it's time to hit the audition trail, everything's automatic. So a schedule of practicing can be based upon the things that are, what is going to require you to go someplace to practice versus having an equipment where you are. If you have a marimba, great. If you don't, that means you're obliged to kind of work on those things where they exist or where you can access them. So probably your snare drum is going to be relatively easy to do. Timpani, technical things you can work out on in some sort of space where you're trying to get across instruments and things like that. But when it comes to getting the sound and doing it and actually working on tuning and those things and be on the drums and the feel of it, that's going to be on the drums. So working out the things that are non-technical things, like, do you know how to count that rhythm? Do you know what's going on with the time? Can you execute those things? And then when it's time to be on the drums, you're ready to go. Mallet-wise, a little tougher, but not impossible. Making sure you have the technical things, breaking things down, whether it's 2 mallets or 4 mallets, but knowing the piece you're going to play, that actually gears a little bit. It makes it easier for you to kind of practice that stuff. The other thing is constantly record yourself during this time. If you can have somebody listen to you or play it in front of some people. If there's a solo ensemble contest stuff happening in your state, wherever it may be, these pieces I'm sure are on it. I would gather most pieces are on that list, and that could be another opportunity for you to prepare it for something that someone's going to have to give you maybe some comments on, or they'll give you some sort of grading on. So that allows you to be able to kind of prepare us too. So using the things that are in place, all solo and state contest stuff, maybe the opportunity to play for a church, maybe the opportunity to play for a group of something, some organization where you're preparing these pieces because you want to get a chance to play them. That's another thing. When you do get in front of someone to play or you do record them, it's going to be much easier. The preparation there is the key. So technical things, musical things, sounds, working your sound, making sure it's good. There are things you can do. And always thinking about the crossover techniques that go between instruments, what you need to do. If you got good singles and doubles, you're going to be good for a lot of different ways. If you got a good multiple roll, you're going to be good in a lot of different ways. Just making sure that, the routine of things, scales, rudiments, rolls, various things that are going to cross over, make sure those are always on point. There's no reason someone shouldn't know 5,000 scales by the time they get to freshman year. There's no reason. And those accessory instruments, don't forget them. and collect some of those things that you can as you go. And of course, don't come in there with the one pair of mallets you have and you're set on those, but be careful. Your sound is you. So,
well, you've been practicing with that one pair for 6 months, so I'm sure they don't sound the same if you've been practicing regularly when you get to the 6-month mark. So be careful.
Hey, I mean,
those timpani mallets that were really poofy and soft, now they're pretty articulate now. Is that what you're going for?
I mean, and we laugh because we know it's an economic thing too, right? It's like,
of course,
yes. But you got to be smart about it. Your sound is what you play. I mean, let's say I could pick up some Reamer sticks, and I was like, oh man, I love the Reamer snare sticks. I will sound different than Terry will sound. Everyone's going to sound different because the way we approach the instrument, the way we approach practicing. And a student will look at you, or I have a student say, "Man, you made it." I said, "Yeah."
Yeah, I was going to say that I teach high school students and mostly juniors and seniors, and so they are trying to prepare for an audition. Right. And I always tell them that they can practice snare drum anywhere. You have a pad to practice, but you need to practice on the drum to develop tone, and sound. So we're in an area here in Mississippi where we have competitive high schools. So it's competitive marching band, competitive indoor, and then several groups do percussion ensemble. And so when they come to school, there might be a band period in the morning, and then they have band period at the end of the day so they can go out to the marching field. Mm-hmm. So a student might have to come to school early just to practice marimba because most kids won't own a marimba. So if they're going to prepare for college, come early to practice marimba. In many cases, they might pick some literature, but usually if they're going to audition for like our all-state Lions band, and that band travels to other countries in the summertime. It's just international, unless the competition's in the States and they can compete with other bands. But they have to prepare something that's, have to have a prepared piece that's at a high level to try to get a first share or to place in the top 12 if you're on the drum line. If your mallet's just tier 1 and 2. So need to come early because most kids won't own a marimba, and most schools won't have a 5-octave marimba. They got to have those 4 1/3s, and it's going to be like the Adams synthetic acoustalon. Is that what's similar to the acoustalon? So that's what they got to practice on. And then I found that most teachers do give private lessons, although they're marching band heavy, and they continue with the students throughout the summer just to make sure that the students can rise to the level of the pieces that they're going to play, whether it be percussion ensemble, whether it's indoor, or some high-level stuff that they need for Lions Band audition. And a lot of the kids in high school are also doing DCI in the summertime. So whether they're playing snare drum or tenors or mallets, they're preparing some pretty heavy stuff for that too, and they bring that into the college experience. So I would encourage them to try to get to school as early as possible, set up a routine if they can, and that's what I've talked to the students that I've teach. Like a certain period of the day, you need to make sure that you can get to the timpani. If you're working on the timpani piece, you can get to the marimba, in a place where you can practice and focus without any noise. Put it in a good private spot, and do your best to like own a snare drum. If you want to be strong on auxiliary instruments, buy those instruments too to make sure that you have them at home, because mostly everything they're using is owned by the school. And in many cases, they don't own books or any other material. So they might have copies that the director gave them. So I encourage them to also buy music. And then when they come to the lessons, I try to make some provisions where they can practice in our building if they need to, especially if they're interested in coming to our university.
That's great. One thing I would add, to me, it's obvious, but I think a lot of the students don't realize this, that, how you prioritize your time. As in, if you feel like your mallets are really strong, then give more to snare drum or timpani, and vice versa. If your timpani is your strongest point, don't divide your time equally between the instruments. Do a little bit less timpani than you do mallets. It's a simple thing. That's the only way pretty much to make yourself more a rounded player is work on your weakness. Work on your weaknesses more.
What everybody has said is great. I would add to that. I think students need to consider who their audience is. I mean, a lot of times high school students, their audience are their peers. But if they're auditioning for a college, I think we all agree, I don't think that a lot of students try to impress. They want to play the hardest things. And I tell my students, I said, you don't have to play the hardest thing. They want to see what you know fundamentally. So if you can play with a good sound, musicality, phrasing, you can demonstrate full strokes, downstrokes, upstrokes, clarity, all of that stuff. That's what they want to hear. That's what they want to see. You don't have to play a Casey Cangelosi piece as hard as, a really hard piece. You just want to demonstrate the fundamentals. And so I think if kids start preparing that way early on, they're going to be a lot more successful, because I think also we agree that we can tell just by hearing the first 3 minutes, we know how they practice. We know if they practice with a metronome. We know if they practice on full strokes or playing with good rebound, with good tone quality. So if they start keeping that in mind when they practice, having a steady practice schedule, but focusing on these fundamentals as soon as possible, they have a lot more success. So it's not about the hardest thing they can play. It's about, are they demonstrating and understanding of fundamentals, not just technique, but tone quality, musicianship as well.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And Terry, I'll add to that. The other thing is, if they know where they're auditioning at, having that brief conversation and say, with the instructor that's probably going to be hearing them and saying, hey, I'm thinking about these pieces, this piece, this piece, this piece. Narrow it down, or if you have an idea of what the pieces are, say, I'm considering this, would this be appropriate? And if they say yes, then okay, then you got an idea. You've already narrowed it down to what that person is looking for. I will tell you exactly what you want to play. You say you did this. What have you done? This would be good for you. And then I've offered lessons. I've offered someone, hey, why don't you come in and I'll give you 30 minutes on the stuff you're preparing. Then I can say, yeah, you need to work on this because I'm gonna be listening for this. Okay, and all those little things, all those little subtle things. And then they get an idea of how you work.
Right.
Don't give too many of those but still enough so that it allows them to understand that, okay, here's what you can get from the program. This is the way you do things. They get a sense of how you work. Because sometimes students, I mean, they just assume, oh, percussion is percussion. And I was like, well, not really. Because some people will, a band director type will, sorry, I shouldn't say that. Band director will say, I just want you to play the pieces in the back of my ensemble. That's what I need you for. That's it. Versus a percussionist who's going to say, well, I really want you to be able to play this. And then you have that person that's thinking, man, I want to develop a solid musician. And they want you to have all those different experiences so that you're going to train the next person coming up. I always think that the best compliment I always gotten was, from a student that I've had and said, I saw my audition when I first came in the door, and I don't know how you accepted me, but then I looked later on, it's like, man, I was playing like a mug. I said, you answered your question. You answered your question. I mean, or they say, man, I want to do what you do. I said, then you need to step it up. They get a sense of what you can do. They get a sense of what's going to happen with you. I mean, Wesley, you said you studied with Tim for the first time. I said, man, that's the woo.
Oh yeah, that was a culture shock.
Man, first time.
After our first lesson, he was like, "Okay, cool. So this is how private lessons work." And I was like, "Thank you. Like, now tell me how it works." Because yeah. The one thing I'll say is the physical and mental well-being in preparing. Raynor, I already knew that's where you're about to go, so we'll segue into it. For physical well-being, I think it's you having those benchmarks and just checking in with yourself of how you're standing to the snare drum. What's your posture? What kind of stance are you? Are you a bladed stance? Like, are you in a boxer stance to like share the weight between your front and back legs so you don't lean too far forward in the snare drum, so you don't lean too far back on the snare drum? And this is where recording yourself kind of helps you see those things. When you play marimba, if you're a shorter person playing on a tall marimba or a marimba that's a little bit higher on a fixed frame, a lot of the times your shoulders might be hiked up. I used to write down on little scraps of paper, keep your shoulders down when playing timpani, right? Or relaxed hands. Think of your chest out and you're projecting your sound to your audience, right? Just giving yourself quick little notes about those things. Notice little tics you have. A lot of us grit our teeth. Sometimes some of us squeeze our feet when we're standing on them sometimes. Some of us may have some tension in our hips, soften the knees, those types of things. As far as wellness and self-preservation, make sure you're stretching the hands, stretching the wrists, the forearms. Sometimes isolate your hands and when you're playing timpani or marimba or when you're getting your 4-mallet rotation, is there any tension here on your ulnar or radial side? Is there any tension that's going past your elbow to your tricep muscles? Really understanding the mechanics of the body. Obviously, if you're 15, 16, 17, you're not going to care about that, but just noticing and being aware of tension in the body, because that tension adds up, compacts on your muscles over and over. The nervous system does its job, and then you're in pain all the time. And then another physical well-being thing is like, how do you look when you're playing the instrument? In the face, physically, what are you wearing? How do these clothes affect the way that you play? How does wearing these shoes affect the way that you play? Maybe you don't need to wear a belt, because the belt buckle might be rubbing against your stomach or something like that. Just, we all have these small little tics, and it's all different. Your hands get cold. Okay, you might need to get some hand warmers in your pocket, or you just noticing these things. And then as far as mental well-being, very quickly, when you're playing for people, this is when you play your snare drum solo for your mama, for your daddy, for your grandma, for your cousin, for your aunt, your uncle, for your friends, for whoever it is, because you can use that. They're going to love whatever you do because that's their baby playing. Right? And I think we need to really hold on to those moments and take a snapshot of those moments, because in our moments of distress and anxiety and pressure and nervousness, if we can recall those moments, that's what calms the body. That's what puts us in a state of mind to be like, oh, I'm just gonna act like I'm playing for my mama because I know she loved it. It doesn't matter if this person loves what I'm doing. She loved what I was doing. And that's a part of the mental preparedness. Give your mind's eye some type of image to get you in the right frame of mind to execute. And you have to practice that. That's another aspect of it. You have to practice walking up to the instrument, doing your 2 to 3 breaths. I'm used to practicing on a 4 and a third, but now I have to play a 5 octave at this audition because that's what colleges usually do. Okay, if I need to, pack a towel, put it on the lower end of the 4 and a third, whatever. Or in your prep, say, okay, I only need to go to this A. What does that feel like? Boom, boom, boom. Great. Step back, breathe, count yourself off, and play. That's another aspect of your being as organized as possible really affects your mental well-being as well. Because if you don't set benchmarks for yourself, you don't write down the tempos, you don't write down your stickings and whatnot, all of that craziness is going to jump out at you on audition day. It's going to be screaming loud in your head. So I think having that be a part of your practice routine, envisioning, working on posture, other physical things that are your tics when you play will definitely help you in the long run. And it's going to change over time as their bodies continue to grow and develop. You can't do the same thing you did at 16 at 35. That hit a lot harder when I just said it. But just really being aware and understanding what your needs are at the time and addressing those and playing where you are.
Wesley, I would say this. You got to put yourself on the day of the audition. That's what you have to do. And say, what do you want to do during that time? And how do you want to present yourself? And like you said, record it. Practice what you're going to play like. Like I was telling you earlier, I got a bunch of tapes of every time I played something. It's like, oh man, that's And I think it's because of doing that, you keep rewinding that stuff in your head and saying, okay, these are things I can do better. These are things I can do better. Oh, okay, I've gotten that. Okay, now the next thing I can do better. Even though you might not be successful every audition, it's the next point of departure for you in terms of making it to the next one. I mean, we see it all the time, after seeing so many students, you come in and you say, you know what, did you really improve from, the point of when you came in to the point where you are now? And if they are really, really paying attention, they will know that. I can remember it definitely with, when I was at Fayetteville State and Burkhead's had a couple of the students I've had from Fayetteville State. And, I can remember where they started at. And, when they got to a certain point, they're like, it's like, yeah, you can do this, but you have to do this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. And you would tell them that. Then Burkhead would get them and say, yeah, what did Parker tell you? Well, that's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
What you need to do. I mean, it's not going to change. And it's almost like if as a group, I wish we could just grab every percussion instructor and say, remember as they go, remember this, and they will pass it on. And that's what, hopefully, what we're talking about now, it's not a black or white thing, it's a percussion thing. It's just that there's some other things that we have to deal with along the way to get those, those little isms out of what we can do and what we can't do. That will make it easier. Provide them a pathway, provide a perspective that says, hey, all of us have done it differently, but we here. And how did we do it? We did it based upon being intuitive, based upon being persevering and not looking at an obstacle, but looking at a way, not trying to go through it, but go around it. Thinking about what resources you do have and trying to take advantage of that. I mean, that story you gave me, Wesley, I remember I remember that so well. But you went to a workshop, you went to an event. So that's within reach. Here at the school, I mean, we've done a GC. I started an FSU Day of Percussion when I was in Fayetteville, and I've continued that. I have a GCSU Day of Percussion. I brought people in. Burkhead, have you been in what, once, twice? I can't remember.
Once to Georgia and once to North Carolina.
Right. And
twice.
And so, see, all the rest of y'all gonna hit the parade for the next one at some point in time, But I'm bringing people in of a global nature. I'll leave it at that. I won't go inclusive, what do you want to call it? But that way, the students see it. They see, oh, wow. Oh, yeah, this is what you do. Oh, okay. And it gives them another perspective. And then the questions start about how to prepare for things, how to go about working on stuff. What did you do to get here? That session that happens after the clinic. That they have a perspective on. So again, I know we all are providing opportunities, but we also have to do our best to kind of, when we see that one student that's interested, we have to give them a little nudge and say, you can do it, but this is what you're going to need to do if you want to do this. This is what you're going to need if you want to do that. Mm-hmm. This is where you have to, and it's not necessarily, we hope that they will pick someone who can teach, that they have access. They have, they'll have opportunity to be able to develop themselves, not just as a percussionist, but also as a musician, and then hopefully as a person who wants to be successful in it. We've talked about that in ABOP. That goes into another subject area, but the idea is we can see those that really want it, and we see those that are maybe at a different crossroads, and them being able to understand that they have to work through it, but they have to work through it a little bit with some guidance. So, yeah.
Very good closing thoughts there to summarize. Any other thoughts, gentlemen?
No, I just appreciate hearing from the others. I think that's
Yeah.
good. I mean, for me, it's encouraging. It's
Brother, it's diversity.
Yeah.
It's not anyone, but it's all of us together. That's what diversity is. And I would say one thing, that this is a big step, whether it's high school to college, college to grad school, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Make your journey fun, enjoyable. If you don't like what you're doing, if you're not enjoying it, I'm not sure you're headed the right way. I would bet Wesley would say his journey was one of the best parts of his life, just learning. And, that's ideally what we want. We want to have fun in what we're doing, and it takes you to a different spot. And hopefully you can look back and observe and say, wow, I did this in 6 months. I really see that this works. Or, okay, I look back in 6 months, I'm not quite where I need to be. What do I need to do? What adjustments do I need to make? Because I have a journey, I have a mission. This is where I want to be. I want to do this audition. I want to do it well. So have fun. Enjoy this. Hitting the drum, crashing the cymbals, You see a kid, they want to just smash the cymbals. I still got that in me. I want to hit a bass drum. I like the sound it makes. I want to blow that ratchet, So, gentlemen, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your time and expertise. Greatly appreciate it. What a great session.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes this episode, College Audition Preparation. Thanks again to our guests, Ricky, Terry, Don, and Wesley, all ABOP folks. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to send an email to info@abop.us. A special thank you to our supporters and sponsors of ABOP's mentorship program. Our corporate sponsors include Black Swamp Percussion, Cooperman, Freer Percussion, Innovative Percussion, InSound Mallets, Majestic Percussion, Marimba One, Malatech, Remo, Sabian, Vic Firth, and Zildjian. ABOP is a nonprofit. Your donations are tax deductible. Check out our website, www.abop.us, for information on how you can contribute. Please follow our podcast and spread the word about ABOP. We greatly appreciate your support. We are the Alliance of Black Orchestral Percussionists, ABOP. Thank you for listening.